You're gonna have to edit this right now. And so here it is. Yeah,
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 yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
My name is Joe. These are just opinions. I am JOEpinionated. Both guests today are musicians. First from Nanaimo, British Columbia. He's currently fronting the band, the Tristones, out of New York City. Guitar player, lead singer, all that stuff. The Tristones.com is the website where you can find Tristan's latest album, Camaro, Tristan Clark. Also, from Nanaimo, British Columbia, currently based out of Toronto, Canada, Tristan Armstrong with the Actual Goners, and also doing his own thing too, releasing music. TheActualGoners.com is one of the websites you can find Tristan at. What's your other website, Tris? Is there Bandcamp? Is that the best place to find you as well?
Sure, Bandcamp or any streaming service. Just search my name or the Actual Goners, and you'll find some stuff.
Welcome both. Big Black Crowes fans, both of them. So just do a little Black Crowes, little extra here for the albums. We want to talk a bit about each album, what we think about it. Just a little quick review, where it ranks, what we're thinking with that album. And so we're starting off with their debut album, and we're not going into the live stuff. And that's one thing with Black Crowes, like the Tall sessions. They have all like these additional albums and versions, and like B-side albums and all sorts of stuff. This is just the studio albums we're talking about here, but those other ones are awesome and worth looking into. Their first album from 1990, Shake Your Money Maker. This one had Chris Robinson, Rich Robinson, Jeff Cease, Johnny Colt, Steve Gorman, and Chuck Leavell on keyboards. What are your thoughts?
Hold on a second. Chuck, what was it?
Chuck Leavell.
Chuck, is that the guy from the Almonds?
Yeah,
He had that band Sea Level.
yeah. He's
Far out,
also the
man.
Rolling Stones.
Sandy passed along that Allman Brothers biography that I think came from you before that.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Have you read it?
I have. Yeah. It's awesome.
It's good. Yeah, yeah.
Definitely. I didn't realize he was on that album. That's far out.
I like this album. This is definitely probably not my favorite Crowes record, but it's kind of cool. Like, they were touring it, and I got to see it actually twice on the Shake Your Money Maker tour. I saw we saw the original trial run of the show at the Bowery Ballroom here in New York City, and that was when they first announced they were getting back together. Sonia and my son, they announced, it was one of those things where they announced the show on the radio or something like that, or it was online, and it was like, get down to Bowery Ballroom this morning and get your tickets, because there's only going to be Bowery Ballroom was only like 400 or 500 people max, if that. So they went down there and stood in line, got the tickets for the show, but they weren't going to give Sonia 2 tickets because she had to have 2 adults there. And so she managed to convince the lady at the booth to give a ticket to my son Lennon, who was like 5, because they were giving out wristbands, right? To wear the wristband all day to get into the show, but they just let him take the ticket. I still even had the wristband here somewhere. I definitely got into that record more after seeing it live again. There it is. Black Crowes, Bowery Ballroom. I even got the poster, it's a signed poster from it.
That was right before COVID, right?
Yeah, and then COVID hit and they shut it down. And then we saw when they actually did the full tour with me and Tristan, the show, they just played the album front to back, and they did like a Stones tune, as an encore. The song that really stood out to me that night was Seeing Things for the First Time.
1992, my introduction was this album, Southern Harmony and Musical Companion. That one was the first to feature Mark Ford. So Mark Ford, Johnny Colt on bass, Steve Gorman, and Eddie Harsh on keyboards. Now,
I think that this album just took a direction that was a bit less produced than their debut. A little bit more scrappy, I guess. I mean, Sting Me was exposed to that one and the Into the Fog live DVD. I think it's a great opener for an album. And in the way that it comes in with that riff and the timing of it slightly throws you off too, first hearing it. I love the way this album sounds. The entrance of Mark Ford into their world is huge.
Mark Ford brought a lot to that band. They definitely sound a little funkier with like tracks like Remedy and No Speak No Slave, sometimes Salvation. And it's a really good sounding record too. Like it's just a lot warmer sounding than Shake Your Moneymaker.
Amorica from 1994 was their next album, so that's their third album. That's one with the penthouse cover. We have the exact same lineup as the previous album with Mark Ford and Rich Robinson, both in the band.
A track I really love off this album that wasn't on my list is Descending. It kind of almost falls into a gospel type feel with, a bit less overt gospel kind of references. A parallel to Virtue and Vice in the presence of the piano, which is pretty rare for a Crows tune. Start to finish, it's really some of their strongest work. Their peak funkiness as well, I think.
Yeah, definitely my favorite Crows album for sure. This is the one. Is it the album Tall that came out? They recorded that first, and that was like the Chris Robinson produced version of this because there's like a lot of the same songs, right?
Oh, okay. I didn't remember that. I remember loving that though.
Because there's like different versions of like the Amorca tunes on there. Some different songs.
Have you seen that on vinyl?
I've seen it on like you can
like Megabucks.
Megabucks, yeah. But yeah, so I think Chris Robinson produced the original version of that record and spent I think it's $200,000 or something like that, and like just tons of money and just like this is from the Steve Gorman book, and apparently they brought it to the record label. The record label didn't want to release it, or something like, anyways, or the band, no one liked the record. They kind of sounded like shit. This is supposed to be like Chris's opus, and so then they took it and hired a real producer and re-recorded all the stuff and wrote new songs for it, and then they got a work out of it.
Wow!
Thank God they did.
Shit. Yeah. I did not know that. Yeah. And that's from the Steve Gorman book too?
Yeah.
And he no longer plays with them. Do we know why?
Because he, after the last tour, they did like that thing with the Air Trucks' band, Tedeschi Trucks, like the Wheel of the Soul thing, or they had their like a co-headliner type thing, and the tour went great. And they were talking about Steve Gorman says he's like, I was in the limo with Chris and Rich. He's like, Chris wouldn't even look me in the eye. It was just like, we just finished the gig. The tour was great, and I'm like, hey man, that was fun, and he just wouldn't. He would just kind of like look out the window, wouldn't even say a word to me. And then so I was like, oh, this is weird. And then so I called Rich the next day. I was like, he's gonna blow this fucking thing up, isn't he? And he's just like, I don't know, man. Something's gonna happen. And then the next day, he got an email from his manager, which is his wife, saying that Chris needs to have a bigger percentage of the money, and Steve Gorman is no longer. I think it was like a three-way split, but at that point, it was a three-way split between the three of the guys, because those are like the three original guys, right? And said we're the only way he'll tour with the Black Crowes again is if Steve, forgoes all any ownership in the Black Crowes and just gets hired back as a sideman.
Next album, so yeah, we mentioned it as well as the final album with Mark Ford in 1996. Chris Robinson, Rich Robinson, Mark Ford, Johnny Colt, Steve Gorman, and Eddie. How do you say his last name? Hirsch.
Yeah. Hirsch. Yeah.
Three Snakes, One Charm. For me, it was not on my radar until I was listening to it a fair bit around 2006, when I went and watched the Crows live. And I like it. It's not like it's a bad album. For me, it just doesn't have as many, like Amorica. I look at the track list and I know every single song pretty much. And every song is a banger. Whereas Three Snakes, yeah, I just wasn't as into it at the time. And I'm sure that down the road, this one will grow on me.
Perhaps at the time when I was first getting into the Crows, through my introduction to By Your Side, that this was a bit too far afield compared to that for me to really latch onto. But coming back to it, like, yeah, really, I don't know that many of the songs well. Blackberry, I think, is great. It's a great tune. Nebuchadnezzar has some good riffage going on. But the rest of it, not too familiar with.
I love this record. This is, I think I mentioned this earlier. This is like their first, when they were kind of getting into the more, they're getting the hippie crowd was getting involved in their shows. So they're getting like all the tape trader guys. This was, you were mentioned in By Your Side was the first one they didn't have a Rich play bass on it, but it's actually this one, even though it says Johnny Colt on it, but in the book they talk about how Rich was just in the studio, like he's like, yeah, I'm really thinking, digging the sound I'm getting on the bass for this record. I think I'm just gonna keep this, and I guess that Johnny Colt guy was there. He's like, oh, cool, because they recorded a lot of stuff individually, right? So apparently he was there during the whole session. He's like, yeah, when you guys want me, like, But even on the record, it's like it has like all the members on it. But I don't think that Johnny Cole guy played a thing on that record. And then he left afterwards because it's like, what's the point?
Shit. Next up, 1999, By Your Side. Big changes. It's a 3-year gap. Did they break up at this point before By Your Side or no? They still
no.
Okay, so no. By Your Side is the first one to feature Oddly Freed on guitar, Sven Pipien on bass. I wasn't crazy with the stop dragging my heart around or kicking my heart around.
Kicking my heart around, yeah.
I don't think I liked this song or this album when it first came out, but yeah, going back and reviewing, it's one of the most complete albums to me. Anyways, Tristan Armstrong.
Yeah. For me, this album is totally one I can listen from start to finish with no qualms. And it is a bit poppier. I will admit that in the songwriting and in the production. But, similarly to what happens on Amorica, it has so many great interlocking guitar parts where you have two parts that go together. And that guy that you mentioned that had his debut on this album,
Sven Pipien or Oddly Freed.
Sven was the bass player, wasn't he?
Yeah, or
Oddly Freed. I feel like whatever his role was minimal, because I remember reading an article in Guitar World magazine, an interview with Rich, saying that he did most of the tracks on this album, unless that was just something he said in the interview, because that is kind of a Rich thing to do. But another part about it is I think almost all the tunes are like in an open tuning on guitar, which has a big sound and is characteristic to this album of like the guitar just being very, very present, very big.
I love this record too. I'll have to admit though, coming from, I was really into Three Snakes, and then coming from this album, I kind of like, if I think of like, the Tragically Hip, I had Day for Night and Trouble in the Henhouse, and then went to like Phantom Power, which is like a more of a poppier sounding record. I was like kind of getting in that sort of darker song vibe. So I was kind of thinking it was going to, when I first heard that record, thinking, man, it was going to get a little more jammy or psychedelic. But this one just has this really, really solid, fun popping tunes. I cranked this one in the old Daytona quite a bit when it first came out.
100%. This album reminds me of you for sure.
But Horsehead Blues, Virtue and Vice, definitely on my favorite ones.
I also want to give a shout out to the album cover, which I always thought was kind of amusing, of these guys all wearing these like white suits. And it's like kind of like black lights lighting vibes, and there's all these glowing orbs. Like, what the hell? Whose idea was that? I don't know. It's pretty funny.
Next up, 2001. This is definitely a divisive album. Love it or hate it. I find that there's a lot of filler on this album. 2001's Lions. I think this is the first album that I actually owned right out of the gate, like, you know, close to its release. I really liked it. It sounded great in the Daytona. Or actually, maybe it didn't. That was after the stereo got stolen, but I definitely played it in that Daytona quite a bit. And this one, same band as By Your Side. And I can't remember when these guys broke up, if it was at this point or after or before. So Tristan Armstrong, maybe you know.
They broke up shortly after this. I do recall that there was this tour, I think it was called like Brothers in Arms or something like that, where it was this band and it was not
Oasis.
An Oasis, yep. Yes. Brotherly Love tour.
Yeah, the Brotherly Love tour. Yeah,
that's what it was. Yeah, but it was Black Crowes and Oasis, and I think this was the tour that Oasis, when they were in Vancouver, somebody threw a shoe at one of them on stage, and they packed up like 3 songs in and went home, and it was a big thing, and it was all over the news. Like Napster was happening, and I remember hearing a bunch of the tracks on Napster, and a version of track 3, Come On, it was like a live on Letterman like recording that somebody uploaded to Napster as an MP3. Memories of reading about the recordings of it in Guitar World magazine. Again, Rich stating that he did all the guitar himself. Nobody else did, only him. And there are cool tones, but I agree there's a lot of filler. I listened through it fully on a drive home a few weeks ago. And one thing that bugs me about this album is Chris's performances on a lot of the tracks are just kind of whack to me. Kind of going into hippy dippy zones, and like he does like a sort of like white guy rap on one of the tunes, and it's just like, this is embarrassing. So that's a bit of a drag. There's some interesting stuff musically, like on Cypress Tree and Cosmic Friend, like some cool kind of like psychedelic stuff going on.
Ozone Mama.
Yeah, but again, the vocal stuff kind of turns me off. This
is the record that could have been a like a new Jimmy Page Led Zeppelin record. The Black Crowes. Steve Gorman is very, very bitter about that. He's like, what do you think was better than a Led Zeppelin riff? Lickin'?
2008. Their comeback, and I think we agreed it was recorded at Levon Helm's barn in Woodstock, New York. I think it was anyways. Luther Dickinson is credited on Wikipedia as being on this album. The album is Warpaint. The song for me that I really loved on this one was Moving On Down the Line.
They came to Victoria on this tour, and I remember that you said you were going to go, but you had a like strep throat or something day of.
Royal Theatre?
Yes. Yeah. I did go to the show. Luther was on the whole show. Sounded amazing. Had really good seats, actually, like just a few rows back from the front. They played the whole album and more. But a highlight from that show was the last track, Whoa Mule. More acoustic-y tune for them that I really dig. It's got some nice harmonies in the chorus. It's just like a more laid-back jam that I dig.
I loved how the recording was, how open and live the record sounded. Like it really sounded like they were all in the same room together, and it just felt like, you know, they're back at a different time. And they can just kind of do whatever they want. They're going to have a solid fan base.
One thing that really comes out in these two albums, Warpaint and the next one, which was 2009, Before the Frost Into the Freeze. For me, is it's obvious, is their influences with the band being a huge one. I mean, they cover the band constantly. Little Feat, another band that, we love. And they cover them constantly. I've actually got their cover of Willin' on Wax, and then the cover of Roll 'Em Easy is on that Brothers of a Feather. But that's, Ain't No Cane on the Brazzle or whatever that song's called. They played that when I went and saw them. They did Do Right Woman, Do Right Man, They do a lot of that stuff, and it's just like, man, it's so cool. So many amazing covers, and the band, they cover all the time. But that really comes through with the songwriting. I find more, especially on these two albums, Warpaint and Before the Frost. So
Before the Frost, I don't know if it's the same situation for Warpaint as well, but some of those tracks that they recorded in Levon's space have an audience.
Yeah.
Which is different, for a studio album.
I had the DVD of that performance. And
that brings an energy to the process as well, which is cool and different. Before the Frost, again, there's some cool, like almost like old timey stuff going on that normally wouldn't be my jam, but I humor it because it's the Crows, and ended up liking it. And even in like Good Morning Captain, it's got some like classic kind of like ragtime sort of moves going on. On my long list was What Is Home. Is that the only track that Rich sings on? And that's as well. It has that that section that goes into 7/4, which is kind of cool.
Back to what you were mentioning about like all the different covers and stuff that they did. One thing that's always fun about a Crow show is the music that's always playing, like all the warm-up music that's playing in the house. It's like there's always like wicked jams going on. They're always playing good shit. Before the Frost and After the Freeze, really warm sounding record. Has some like a lot of folky influences.
Yeah, I like every song on this one, honestly. The Houston Don't Dream About Me, and the band played on, a lot of Beatles sound and stuff. Yeah, I was also going to mention the Grease Band. A lot of bands that I kind of like came to know because of these guys covering them too. Humble Pie for me was sort of like a big one. This album was amazing. So this is the last album that they put out. And do you have a favorite live album? Is there only one? I mean, the live with Jimmy Page, is that your favorite, or what would you say?
That's probably the one I've spun the most, just because that gets played quite a bit in our house. But I do have I got the newest one from the Shake Your Moneymaker one. That was great. But also I have that Wiser for the Time big comp where it's like half the tunes are acoustic and half the tunes are. It's like when they came with that Crowology thing, which is another cool record.
And Tristan, you mentioned earlier too, was that Into the Fog?
Yeah, Freak and Roll Into the Fog at the Fillmore in San Francisco.
I think I have that DVD.
Yeah. And that was where I first heard Sting Me. It was actually it was during a session with Rick Salt that he put that on. And yeah. But that's
the tour that I saw.
Okay, cool. Because they also the last track on that is the Night They Drove Old Dixie Down. But yeah, and Mark Ford is on that, which is great. And it's also a great display of wicked vintage guitars coming off and on stage, which is another appeal of the Crows as a guitar player, is just scoping out the gear.
Me and our good friend Trevor Falls went and saw Rich Robinson in Buffalo at this at Ani DeFranco's club in Buffalo, and it's like a basement that holds like maybe 120 people or something like that. And he had like it was like a guitar show. It wasn't Magpies, it was Rich Robinson's band. Yeah,
similar thing to me at it was not the Biltmore Cabaret, but it's a place that's near GM Place. It's tiny. It's underground bar. The Media Club, the Rich album, Through a Crooked Sun. Yeah, so I saw him on that tour, and same thing, like $100,000 worth of gear with him in that tiny club. He had his own roadie, handing him guitars, and it's like, it was a full show, but like, again, like barely over 100 people, awesome vibes. Ran into the whole band in an alleyway not far from the venue. They were out there having a smoke or something. I was like, oh, great show, guys. Rich is just like, thanks, man. Just like totally expressionless. Not that stoked. That's, I guess, his vibe. But
it's been a slice. Thank you very much.
Looking forward to seeing the edit.
submerged at sea, days and weeks at a time. 96 million pounds of steel go swimming by. I see your eyes surveying in the mirror on the tide. Am I overstating this need to make it right? 'Cause I know the reason why you hide beneath the waves. I'll keep on waiting, I'm counting down the days. We spin the air and waste the words the mind recites. The